in 2012, and really it was
Sorry, I got to start over. I wasn't recording the microphones.
Oh.
Let's start over. Coming up on Behind the Craft.
We found out during this process that those that are overdosing aren't the people that I thought they were.
Exactly, yeah.
That's where the idea of be a user came in. So this idea of like, we don't like calling people drug users, but let's flip it on its face and let's just go right at people with, hey, you can be a user. I think as soon as you realize, okay, I can identify with that person, okay, I got to look at this different.
Welcome to Behind the Craft. Today I am with CEO and founder of BrandCraft, Torey Azure. Torey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is your first time on the show. You haven't been a guest before, so tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about BrandCraft and what you guys do.
Yeah, so BrandCraft was founded in 2012. I was kind of at a crossroads of what I wanted to do, kind of when I grew up. You know what I mean? It was a career change for me, but it's been great. We've had good growth. We've had, we've solved problems for people that I think is exciting for all of us that work in this industry. And we've done it in a way that's really high quality. Mm-hmm. And it's, we always say that we try and solve business problems in the marketing field. We don't try and just be marketers. So to me, that's my pride, is that we solve big problems and that we can tackle things that maybe other companies can't. Mm-hmm. So now what is BrandCraft? BrandCraft now is it's still creative agency, mm-hmm. But really the brand side is what has separated us, with makes sense with our name that would be the case.
Yeah,
it's really separated us until the brand is fundamental to the business, and then after that we say, okay, after we establish the brand, now we can move into web and marketing and essential assets that those companies need, mm-hmm. and then move into marketing. So we're a full service agency that serves the mid-market. That's really where we're at.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about not a brand project, which is probably kind of funny, but I think there's some tie-ins to brand, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it specifically. Yeah. This is a campaign we did for a local health district in the state of Washington, and it was sort of an anti-stigma and awareness campaign about drug use that we called Be a User. I don't, we can explain more what that means, but could you, I guess maybe you can fill everybody on. What was this campaign about? What was the project?
Yeah, so when they came to us, they really said, like, hey, I'm in the millennial generation. I'm not a millennial. What the hell am I?
I don't know. Not a boomer.
No, I'm an X. I'm a Gen X.
Yeah.
Man, I can't believe I just did that.
That's all right.
I'm in the Gen X category. When I was growing up, we had a lot of public service announcements. In fact, they were announced that way. This is a public service announcement from. Mm-hmm. This is essentially a modern version of a public service announcement. Like, we need to get a message out to people. It's not to create conversions. It's not to sell anything. It's to let people know that there's a problem, mm-hmm. that there's this issue in our community that we need to solve for. Most everybody knows what the issue is and they're familiar with it.
Right. Our
job in this campaign was to kind of decide, all right, how do we address this in a different way, basically. But they approached us. It went out for bid. We ended up winning that through both a price and a performance model of like, hey, what are we going to do to solve for this? And the tie to brand is that at the same time, we're working with the health department on a rebrand.
Yeah.
And so this was a great time to work with them again in another project. And that's the introduction to it. That's how it all started.
Yeah. So the specific ask or the specific public service announcement is around fentanyl use and the mm-hmm. rise of fentanyl use and the dangers of fentanyl use. What kind of unique challenges come with a project like that specifically from a messaging standpoint?
For me, I think the biggest challenge, and I would love to hear your response back on this too, but for me, the biggest challenge was to recognize the inherent bias mm-hmm. or what term did we use? Stigma.
Yeah.
The inherent bias or stigma that we all have for mm-hmm. drug users.
Yeah.
And the health department, when we talk to them, are so educated on the subject and they deal with it so much that they have a very different view. Like, they understand the problem so much. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what was kind of magic about when we joined on it and we're discussing it, is that, and by the way, I think this is a great part about, Aaron, often you and I are working on brand and working on these projects. This is the great part about, I think, our perspective on these projects mm-hmm. is we say, hey, we are the demo here.
Yeah.
and you're saying things to me that I don't think the public knows.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out how to message that out, and okay, I understand the problem, but this is where we need to go. So big education for us, I think, like listening to it. I have I think I probably had the benefit of my wife working with some of the same problems that we were addressing here. And so I had known some of it, but still learned a lot from the health department and from the people that were involved in the project about like, hey, we need to understand the problem.
Yeah.
For that reason, a public service announcement isn't much different than a marketing campaign for another product, which is define the problem set and then figure out, okay, how do we message it and say we have a solution for it?
Yeah, I think education would be the biggest challenge for me as well. Even what you said drug users, and it's kind of funny. It's like they kind of reshape, like, because they don't use the word drug users. They say people who use drugs.
Yeah.
And that kind of was a big thing that shaped our direction, was like, okay, let's focus on the people and the value of the person, not the user. The other thing that I think was a big challenge that I'm sure we'll touch on later for me is the fact that we were trying to figure out how do you be edgy enough to get attention and to make sure this is a successful campaign, but also be safe enough to still play within those PC, I'll say, I don't know a better way to put it, the PC guidelines that you have to do from a state organization that we were working with.
Yeah. Well, you know that we had a challenge with that.
Yeah.
And we proposed an idea, and that idea was generally accepted pretty quickly. But then, one thing we always say in brand and in marketing is, like, the worst case scenario is design or marketing by committee, where what you end up with really at the end of marketing by committee is you end up with a product that is just kind of blah.
Yeah.
There's not much to it. There's not much bite in the messaging. There's not much bite in the creative. It's very safe. And I always tell people, like, you can do that, but you're going to spend way more in dollars just to get people to remember it. If you make it memorable and you make it different, now people are going to remember it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, we've had in the past, clients have done this, literally told us by the time it got to the end, they're like, we're really looking for a beige Buick here, something that everybody feels okay with. And it's like, right, but then what was the point of the money you spent? Because now no one's going to remember it in terms of your audience. Like, yeah, everyone internally is happy, but no one outside of your organization even remembers. Yeah. It becomes a waste. Yeah.
No, yeah. And when we get to that point, I think we do a good job. I think all of us at BrandCraft do a good job of walking a client through why that's not really what they should do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're here to serve them. If they really press us and what we end up with is a beige Buick, none of us, within the agency are happy about that. And I think we do a really good job of not getting to that point.
I agree. Yeah.
I can't remember a lot of instances. There's a few in the last 2 years, 3 years where we've ended up there. So, yeah, I think that we do a good job of being like, I don't think that's the right move here. Why don't we consider this? And yeah, I think that comes from confidence in knowing that our process and that how we view it is we know it works.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think this is a good example of that. So yeah, I want to hear maybe you just tell everybody who's listening. So, like, from a messaging standpoint specifically, what was our strategy and how did we balance those things? Like, just, I guess, kind of tell people the campaign, the message, the story behind the campaign.
Yeah. So I believe that this was really magic a little bit in how this came to be, because when we had a first meeting with the client, and this was our creative meeting where we're trying to figure out ideas and we're trying to figure out what sticks and what doesn't. And they were great. They were educational. They told us a lot of things. They provided opinion. But one of them was, in fact, I remember one of the members saying, well, we can't fight the stigma problem. We're never going to win that battle. Like, let's not focus on stigma. Let's focus on drug safety and overdose prevention. And so we were like, okay, let's think about how we can do that. And honestly, a lot of the things, if I remember back on it, a lot of the ideas that we had, they just have been done before. Yeah. There's so much actual marketing out here. A lot of health departments run these. Yep. A lot of them run the same campaign, but some are doing their own campaign. And we're like, how do we be unique here? So we came up with this idea that, number one, reduce stigma. And so, but let's do it without making that the focus. Let's make people not realize that the first thing we do is break down the stigma. The second thing we do is educate. That's where the idea of be a user came in, which is this idea of, like, we don't like calling people drug users, but let's flip it on its face and let's just go right at people with, hey, you can be a user.
Mm-hmm.
But what can you be a user of? You can be, you can use compassion.
Right.
You can use care. You can use naloxone.
Yeah.
You can use these things to be be an ally to those people that need help when it comes to drug use. And we thought that worked because we found out during this process that those that are overdosing aren't the people that I thought they were.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is interesting that they're an older demographic. They're functional working people.
Yeah, not unhoused people.
Not unhoused.
Yeah.
They're not in the street corner. They're not the ones holding the sign. They're not the ones, that's not, this user is functional, often in construction, in professional services, in personal services.
Lots of physical labor typically.
Physical labor,
right.
yeah. And they often overdose by themselves in their house or in somewhere familiar to where they typically just live. And so that was eye-opening to me to realize this problem, we really need to go after those people close to those people, those that are girlfriends, wives, family, mother, father. Like, how can we let them know, like, hey, you just don't let them use alone.
Right.
Don't let them do whatever. Make sure you have naloxone. Like, it's a message that can't be said enough, but I love the idea of flipping it on its face and right away stripping some of that stigma by calling someone a user and almost trying to make it cool. Like, I'm a user. I use compassion. That was the idea behind it. Yeah,
and I think it came directly from just the need, which is what I think is really cool. Sometimes the simplest ideas are the hardest to come up with. I think we spend a lot of time whiteboarding, just writing a million different taglines and catchphrases. But it's just like, what do these people really need to do? It's like, what are we asking them to do? And like, we're asking them to like use patience, to use some perspective, to like think about the value these people bring to society, and use mindfulness and how they can make a difference. And then all of a sudden it was obvious. It's like, well, yeah, then be a user. Use perspective, use all these things. To
that point, I think that the easy place for, I think, a lot of people's brain to go is these are non-productive people in society.
Right.
They have problems. They're unhoused. Why do we care to solve this problem? Let them keep acting the way they do. They're never it's never going to get solved. I think as soon as you realize that we have mothers and fathers and loved ones that are close to people and actually living a life like we all think, it helps to break down that stigma a little bit. Those people that are unhoused, those people that are drug users that live on the streets, they're just as important as the other people. Yeah. It's just about changing perspective, though, and saying, okay, I can identify with that person.
Right.
I've got an uncle who's a construction worker.
Yep.
I can identify with that. Okay, I got to look at this different. I got to look at this and wonder, is he a user? Is he one that, And the campaign isn't trying to accuse everyone of being users, but using compassion and caring about people and having a conversation about drugs and whether someone is using drugs. It's not a bad conversation to have.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was why it was important to me to make sure we always leaned on first, like the value that person brings outside of the using or the drug they used. And so all the messaging was like, for hairdressers, who was one, it was like, because just how much you enjoy being in that chair, the stories you get to hear, because she's a great friend. Use compassion, use patience, and be there, be a supporter. So we leaned on a lot of those things. Use a fun uncle was one of the examples.
Yeah.
Like, because he's a great uncle to your niece. Yeah. So we started at the beginning about brand. So this wasn't a brand project per se, but this campaign sort of has a brand of its own. Can you talk to maybe about how that process is different from a brand process for like an overall brand for a client? And then how do you determine how to make a brand, have a campaign have its own brand, but how that works with the client's overall brand too?
Yeah, I tend to have much looser parameters than I think other brand people do when it comes to this, because I believe as long as the campaign lives up to the promise of the main brand, I don't know that I care so much where it goes. It can't be in conflict though with that.
Right.
Like, you can't go do a campaign that is I'm trying to think of an example of something. Like, if you were, like, for example, let's pick a luxury, like Rolex. If you're Rolex and all of a sudden you run a campaign about a discount in value and a new watch offering that's really inexpensive, you're doing damage to the main brand.
Right.
But yeah, so it is interesting because, and a lot of this happens in the nonprofit world and in the public service world where, you have campaigns, and those end up with, like, this one ended up with its own logo, its own color scheme. We want people to identify the campaign and understand what be a user means. And the main brand kind of took a second stage to this one as well, because the health department really wasn't the focus of this, although our links and landing pages and all that they really go back to, well, we built a microsite for them, but ultimately people could end up back at the health department if they wanted to learn more. So I think that it is different, though. We don't define campaign brands in the exact same way, but there's similarities. There's similarities in how we research. There's similarities in how we come up with naming, which is finding problem sets. How do we flip this on its face? How do we message it in a way that I think that one of the things you're really good at and good writers are really good at is using words and phrases that I can't remember what you've called it before, but they have like dual meaning or like anything like that we can bring that just, it's got to be memorable. That's the biggest thing, is just be memorable. And we try and do the same thing in brand, which is don't be like everybody else. Do something different. Be memorable.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, though, which is that maybe we touched on here at the beginning, just our approach to brand being about more than just the look and the style, but it's about that message. And that's how you balance the two. It's like you might have a different visual style for this campaign than your brand's visual identity, but the message and the feeling that the audience is left with isn't in conflict with your overall brand. So you spoke about the visual identity, though. So can you maybe talk about that? Like, what was that? How did this visual identity for the Be a User campaign specifically communicate these ideas and communicate the emotion we were looking for with the campaign?
Well, at the start, our client was clear. They didn't want this to be dark. They really were opposed to having this dark, like, death theme, or, hey, your uncle could die at any time. Instead, it's like, hey, how do we make this just a conversation that people need to have, and just something that's a little bit more approachable than that? And we really took that into account. And so when we did the design, it was more like free flowing, almost like it was hand drawn. The colors were softer and the colors were more feminine. I wouldn't call it a feminine campaign, but the colors were much more maybe springy, or they had a vibe to it that had more energy. Positivity and energy, I think, would be a better way to describe it. And that was purposeful. We actually thought a lot about that when we were doing it, because they told us that. And I thought, actually, when they said that was an interesting take. Like, that would be cool to do something. Most of the other campaigns, when we go back and look at them, they gave us an example in Seattle of a campaign called Laced and Lethal. And you've all, throughout the history of drug campaigns, you can start with, this is your brain on drugs. Everything is meant to just terrify you. And they wanted this campaign to be more about, like, hey, how do we as a community help this problem? We're not going to solve the problem. How do we help protect those closest to us? And I think that's a very important message.
And the data backed it up. I remember that in research, like, when they said one pill can kill, for example, and then they switched that to, but one conversation can save a life, it became so much more effective. People remember, it gives you a positive outcome to the action you can take. And that's what we wanted to lean on with this too.
The action, I think, is a really important part of that. And that's why I liked on the Be a User campaign that is an action in and of itself. Like, hey, you can do this today. You can be a user and use compassion. And so that part I thought was great. The campaign says a lot without saying anything. And then, of course, we say more in the actual spots that we run.
So unlike treating this as a design project or a messaging project, it was really a strategic first approach. So why do you think our approach to strategy is so valuable when it comes to making a design or making a campaign successful?
I think it's easy conceptually and hard to execute. We listen to the problem. We don't try and get our emotions involved and use our personal experiences to solve that problem. First, we ask questions and we learn. I mean, I think any marketer, any brand person, if I could say, do this first, like, try and remove before you bring it back in, because I think it's okay to bring in your personal views as well, or your personal experiences. But before you do that, listen and try and learn as much as you can about everybody's experience with whatever issue that is, or whatever the company is, or what on brand, like whatever the company is, how they got to where they are. Because we have in the marketing world a very real perspective in how much marketing that we see. And I think sometimes we forget that, and we think that the client either knows something about what they should do, but they don't. They're subject matter experts. So we always treat them, every client, as the subject matter expert we're here to learn. And it's our job to be the conduit between the subject matter expert and the end user, the campaign.
Right.
And that's where the strategic, okay, how do we bridge this gap between the people that know a lot about their own company, or in this case about public health and about overdose? How do we bridge that gap between the person that sits there and thinks that they're all just that they're a menace to society, they shouldn't really be around? Like, how do we bridge that gap? And I think that can only be done by understanding the problem and thinking really hard and not accepting what other people have said.
Right.
Just don't accept it. Know that you have to do something different. And I think that, some of the campaigns I see out there, I don't think anybody mails it in necessarily, speaking of like in the marketing world. But I just think sometimes like the difference between an agency like us when we get in that mode and others is that we try so hard to solve that problem in a way that's unique, that I think it always shows itself in the end that we did that.
Cool. Is there anything else about this project you want to touch on that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think it's interesting that we, when we talked about delivering this campaign, we decided to only deliver it via social video. And I think that's a great idea and might seem logical to everybody. It's like, oh, of course you would. Why wouldn't you do that? But, we live in a mid-market. We live in a community that's, fairly conservative, mid-market. And, still we have clients that expect to see things on TV, that expect to see things on radio and hear things on radio. And we said, hey, we can get a much broader reach, and we can hit more people if you let us, do video views in Facebook. And so that's the campaign that we're running. They agreed with that and they enjoyed it. But yeah, that's it. That's about the biggest difference. Really, it's developing the campaign, getting out to the community. Right now, we're at the stage of it just starting to launch, which is exciting. And the client has reached out with another project, so we're excited to continue to work with them. Cool.
Well, for everyone listening and watching, if you want to check out some of the video work and just get a better feel for the campaign overall and the messaging, you can find out about that at beauser.org. Torey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
Cool. Bye, everybody.